Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Aisha Subarkash. The US's chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan last year raised questions about what the world's largest military left behind. A recent Pentagon report answered that question, confirming that the US abandoned some $7 billion worth of military equipment when it left the country. The Taliban, which surged to power in August, took control of most of that hardware. Now, with the US set to send billions of dollars of weapons to Ukraine, are there any lessons to be learned? Let's take a look at this report. Now, for more on this, joining us from the UK is Scott Lucas. He's a professor in American Studies at Birmingham University. And from Istanbul, Gloria Shkurti Ozdemir. She's a researcher at the SETA Foundation, a security and policy think tank. A warm welcome to you both. Thanks for joining me on Straight Talk. Gloria, let me begin with you. A recent Pentagon report says that the US left behind $7 billion worth of military equipment when it left Afghanistan last year. What's your take on this report and what consequences will this lead to?
Of course, we all became witness of how the Taliban went out on the street, showing the arms that were left from the United States in there. And many of the experts at the time called that possibility as the worst possible scenario for the United States. So that word indeed summarizes the whole situation that happened in Afghanistan at the time. This is one of the worst scenarios because in all those arms that indeed the United States gave to the Afghanistan government at the time with the faith or with the intention that they will help to the rebuilding of Afghanistan, they went directly to the hands of their enemies or the people that those arms were supposed to fight. So, of course, in this sense, we have the threat of those arms to be used against the civilians, and that is one of how can I say, that is something that was not supposed to happen. And the United States gave those arms to the government.
But on the other hand, the U.S. is already downplaying the amount of left behind, saying the equipment wasn't the state-of-the-art and much of that wouldn't be useful to the Taliban because of the heavy maintenance and equipment needs. Is the U.S. right here?
Partially. I mean, it must be said that some of that equipment, it's unlikely can be used by many players in Afghanistan because some of the equipment was destroyed before the Americans left. In other cases with equipment, you need codes, you need certain types of technology for them to be operational. But no, you cannot say that all of the billions of dollars of equipment that the U.S. left behind, especially with the overnight departure from Kandahar in the south of the country, the largest U.S. base in the world at that point, that all of that equipment is beyond the hands of the Taliban or indeed other factions in Afghanistan who might try to grab some of it.
Mm-hmm. So, Gloria, the Pentagon report says that it is not clear what condition the artillery and weapons were left in. What does this tell us about the United States policies when it comes to abandoning a country?
If you recall, at the time, it was thought from the United States that at least the process will take a couple of 6 months for the government, that they will take control of Afghanistan, but they were wrong at that sense. So on the way how the United States left Afghanistan, it was kind of failure of both its intelligence and its foreign policy as well.
So it seems like they had a poor control system over these weapons. So, Scott, how is the Congress reacting to this report? Because many U.S. lawmakers heavily criticized Biden's withdrawal and what had happened after this withdrawal. So will the Biden administration see more pressure?
I think if we were in a world in 2022 where we had not had succeeding conflicts and the news cycle had changed, absolutely. The Republicans and the Trumpists within the Republicans would put pressure on Biden, and indeed others, would just simply raise necessary questions. But guess what? The world moved on far too quickly. And so I think the Russian invasion of Ukraine will overshadow Afghanistan, because for reasons we can discuss, the U.S. approach to military aid in Afghanistan is far different than that in Ukraine. We're not facing the same type of disaster in Ukraine that we faced with the withdrawal last year from Kandahar and other bases.
Mm-hmm. So on the other side of the world, Gloria, the U.S. has sent several $1 billion worth of military aid to Ukraine since Russia attacked the country on February 24th. And just this week, the House passed $40 billion in more aid, with large part of that being dedicated to military aid. How has that aid helped Ukraine so far?
So as far as I'm concerned, still that is not how can I say that the weapons have not been used fully, and there are some discussions whether this aid will help Ukraine in advancing its war against Russia. However, everything, according to the latest experts, the reports that say, everything depends on the way how Ukraine soldiers or Ukraine army is going to make use of these weapons. Mm-hmm. So until now, indeed, I can say there is a positive feedback from the arms, because we see that Ukrainian army is still resilient in the war, and I hope it will continue to be so.
So, Scott, it seems also that the U.S. officials are less concerned that the weapons will wind up in the hands of Russians for the time being. But what happens if the current president, Zelensky, loses power in the coming years and is replaced by a more unpredictable or anti-American leader?
Well, I think you have to deal with the reality as we have it right now, and that is that Russia's Plan A, which was precisely to detain or kill Zelensky and other Ukrainian leaders, failed. Had the Russians succeeded, we wouldn't be talking about military aid, not only from the U.S., but from European countries and indeed from the international community. The reality is now that the Russians have further failed by not being able to occupy much of northern Ukraine and are now trying to take territory in the east and in the south. And a large part of the reason for that has been this military aid, because in contrast to Afghanistan, it's been provided in a very coordinated fashion. Again, not just by the U.S., but many other countries. And the Ukrainian military have been trained in the use of advanced anti-tank systems, anti-missile systems, and now heavy artillery like howitzers. In other words, nothing succeeds like success. And because the Ukrainians have succeeded so far against Russia, you're not facing that disastrous scenario that the Russians can grab billions of dollars of U.S. and other countries' equipment.
Gloria, given its past experiences, will the U.S. be able to track the supply of anti-tank, anti-aircraft, and other weaponry it has sent to Ukraine? I mean, is history like to repeat itself, given the fact that the U.S. scrambled over the Stingers after the Soviet war in Afghanistan, and weapons sold to Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Iraq found their way into the hands of wrong people?
Yeah, that's correct. Like in many cases, we've seen like United States weapons being on the hands of the wrong people, such as, for example, Al-Qaeda fighters, or in Afghanistan, as we saw with Taliban. But for the case of Ukraine, I would have to agree with Scott in here. The situation is a little bit different. I don't see that as a possible scenario in the close future. I don't think that is going to happen there.
Scott, but what happens in any case? These weapons wind up at the hands of foreign fighters who recently joined Ukrainian soldiers and far-right groups who are fighting in the eastern parts of Ukraine. Isn't there any risk?
Yeah, first of all, let's just deal with the issue of the far-right groups, because you're probably referring to the Azov Battalion.
Yes.
The reality, counter to Russian disinformation, is that what you did is you brought the Azov Battalion within an organized setup within the Ukrainian Armed Forces in 2017, precisely so they weren't a far-right group outside. They were split from their political group, which has only one seat in the Ukrainian parliament. So in a sense, you bring the Azov Battalion within the organized system. And similarly, when you talk about the foreign fighters, there are some people who have volunteered, similar to those who went to Spain in the 1930s to fight alongside the Ukrainians. But we're not talking like foreign fighters, such as those with the Islamic State or Al-Qaeda. The biggest handover of equipment right now, I have to be honest with you, is not U.S. equipment being handed over to others. It's Russian equipment, which has been handed over, a lot of it, if it hasn't been destroyed, to the Ukrainians.
So I understand you both say that the Ukraine crisis is completely different than other examples. But Gloria, what if the Biden administration or a different US president loses interest in Ukraine, since this conflict looks to continue for a while now?
The chance of a U.S. president to lose the interest on Ukraine war seems a little bit low to me, because Russia is one of the main targets and the main threats for the United States alongside China. So all of the defense documents, all of its own grand strategy is focused on its war or how containing Russia and containing China as well. So in this sense, I don't think that anytime soon there is a possibility for a new president to lose his interest on the Ukraine war. I don't think that there will be a change in policy soon regarding that. And I want to remind here about Trump, for example. Like, he was very close to Russia, but during Trump administration, we have seen, for example, a lot of support for the arms sales, and it was the years when the arms sales were increased the most in the United States. So I think that not soon such a scenario is possible.
All right, Scott and Gloria, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.